Hi, this is Chuck Martin. We're at the AI Summit London, and I'm so happy to say I've got with me back here Rajat Kotra, Group Director of Data Analytics at Informa. Welcome back.
Thanks, Chuck. Good to have you here.
So we talked last year. A lot has changed in AI since that. Tell me did you expect last year would be where we are now in AI?
No.
No one did.
No one did actually, yeah. Like I was saying that the last few months in generative AI has been more like decades for us. But I think the most important thing it has done, if you ask me, is that it's brought the whole issue around ethics and trust and safety front and center. But yeah, to your point, last year, AI has been there for a long time, but this year would be like a watershed year for AI, and let's hope that we, as business, make the best use of that moment and get AI into adoption, at a large scale now with trustworthy and safe principles.
So you've been involved in AI for a long time. Has this sort of changed the whole dynamic for you in terms of people saying, hey, now we're interested in things that you've been doing forever?
Yes, I have been in the field of AI for at least the last 16 years. And of course, it has been in the academic circles before that, but I'm a business person, so I'd like to call myself, coming from the business side. And yes, I think what has happened last November and this year, it's really brought AI into common language. Right? Till last year, it was more focused around the technology landscape, but now I think AI is already becoming a boardroom discussion in every business, I'm talking to. So this is good, positive sign. At the same time, we have to make sure that the hype does not remain hype, but actually gets into implementation and adoption, right? In a really serious scale.
How do you get away from the hype? I agree with you. That's a big deal right now because it's just generative AI, ChatGPT. Everyone said, okay, we've got to have this. So here, give us this in the company, and you know the implications of why you can't do that.
Yeah. No, so the hype is good. The hype is good that it gets everybody's attention, but then you need the right governance within the company. So smarter companies will make sure that they do governance right up front. And I can tell you from whatever we are seeing in our kind of forums and in our community, there will be mistakes made. And as we all know, bad news travels faster than good news. So definitely, the hype will help. But at the same time, I think if businesses are smart enough to focus on the right use cases, and I always say focus on the customer. Focus on the customer first, make sure that you generate value for your customer, and then use whatever energy you've left after that to generate more efficiency. There is a lot of benefit to take from here. But again, like I said, caution is the right word right now. Tread cautiously, but tread with enthusiasm.
So with the customer focus you mentioned, is there risk with that? If something goes wrong with because you're affecting a lot of customers potentially.
There is absolute risk with that, right? The biggest risk is data. A lot of the large language models have been built on open source data, but as companies start to implement that, they will have to augment that open source data with company data, customer data, product data. So there's significant risk on that, but as long as you manage that risk properly and you have the right governance and controls in place, I don't see a reason why we can't generate value for the customer.
So is generative AI in the corporate world going to cost a lot of money, new money, new funding, or is it going to be relatively inexpensive to deploy?
Well, I think it's too early to say that. I think there's some people having a point of view which I don't fully agree with, is that it is going to democratize the cost as well. I don't think so. I think if you're an IBM or a Microsoft or a Google, things might be different for you. But if you are anybody else, a medium-sized business or even a not so technology mature business, there are significant costs which you are right now not thinking about. Right? There is going to be significant compute cost, especially when you query the data back and forth. So yeah, there is a cost angle. I think the businesses who are implementing generative AI right now haven't fully understood the compute cost of this equation.
So are they going to have to go revisit that eventually, do you think?
I think so. See, what's going to happen is that a lot of this compute cost for generative AI, take for example, prompts back and forth, will be kind of consumed within your cloud cost, but you have to really monitor your cloud cost significantly now. Right, back in the old days, well, 7, 8 years back, everybody was moving to AWS, and AWS was, pretty much saying it's all pay by use. Initial cost seems to be very low, but the moment you kind of look at what you've been spending on development purposes, as the months go by and more data scientists add on to their loads, without necessarily putting things in deployment, the cost can significantly spiral. So that piece right now is not fully clear, but I can tell you that one way to manage that would be to make sure that the cloud computing cost is included and you are monitoring it very carefully.
So are companies likely to go down this path and all of a sudden be surprised when they get a bill?
There is some surprise in store, if you are not being smart enough upfront.
So do companies understand all these implications you're talking about?
I would say some do, and for some who don't, they will realize very quickly.
So where do you, I know you've talked about ethics and bias in the past, where does that fit with generative AI?
Well, like I said, I think the one positive thing beyond the hype which generative AI has created, and people like us are kind of seeing this as the best output, among others, is that it's brought the discussion about ethics, trust, right in the center now. It's pretty clear that if generative AI is not governed properly, there is significant risk here, right? As we start, putting more use cases, we are trying to query large data sets. What is coming out may not be what you expect. So it's very, very important right now to make sure that regulations, while they will take time, but they are going to come. I think if there's one positive thing in all this is that now the regulators and the governing bodies and companies cannot ignore this anymore. We have been saying this for the last 4 or 5 years that ethics and trust is the most important part of adoption of AI. You can develop a lot of stuff, but as you deploy, you need to make sure that people trust. With generative AI now, it's going to be the most important thing if this has to get adopted.
So do you see that companies should allow their employees to use, say, ChatGPT or not, or just be neutral on it?
Well, that's a $1 million question.
Yeah.
Some companies have already stopped, allowing employees to use that. I think if you are doing that, you want to make sure that the data which the employees are using is not proprietary. It's data which is publicly available. I think one of the safer ways of doing that right now is to sort of do with companies like Microsoft, who are going to ensure some kind of data management and control, but not going on doing this with new partners who at best are saying that they will not use your data, but they are not guaranteeing any data security or privacy on that. They will not use your data to improve their models, but they're not going to store your data in the most secure fashion. So in my view, tread carefully on that as well. Efficiencies can be drawn, but you need strong governance around this. What are employees using it for, and how are they managing this data flow back and forth is something which is very important to consider.
So when businesses are looking at, we want to start being involved in generative AI, you've got IBM Watson X, you've got Google Bard, you've got Microsoft Bing, there'll be heaven knows how many others. How do they decide? Because they all have like different, they kind of look alike, but they don't?
How do they decide? So you mean how do companies decide which to go on for?
Yes, which one to pursue, because once they pursue it, that's the way they're going.
Yeah, so I think my personal view on this is that while it will be safer to go with some of these bigger companies, they may also be expensive.
Right.
So there will be, kind of a period of settling down on this. Some, startups will also start offering solutions which are much more cost competitive, and will then start kind of partnering with cloud computing, players to make sure that the data security aspect is managed, if not in the best possible way, but at least in a manageable way. So I would say, for kind of scale use cases, yes, you could go with one of the bigger players, knowing fully that there's a cost to pay on that. But for customer-focused specific use cases, partnering with smaller players is always going to be important, and part of the planning. It's part of strategy. I would say, build, buy, partner. All these three would be important going forward for a company like ours, for example.
Right. So a year from now, we're sitting here having this conversation. Will we be talking about the same thing or something different?
All I'm hoping for is that a year from now, I'm sure we'll be talking about something on generative AI and AI in general. I sincerely hope so too. But I'm just hoping that we are talking about the good aspects and not the bad examples.
Great. Thank you. I look forward to that conversation
Thanks,
in a
Jack.
year. Great to see you again.
Thank you. Thank you, man.